I'm just going to talk to y'all briefly about suspicious activity reporting and the network across Texas, the importance of it, why we feel it's important, and why are we in front of you. And that's because of the recent executive orders that came out from the governor's office, specifically Executive Order 5, which is told us to work with the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And so very glad to have this audience to kind of get y'all briefed in a little bit about suspicious activity reporting and then specifically school safety related. So we're going to go through what is suspicious activity reporting and what is suspicious activity. So I'm going to go ahead and put up reporting because the only difference is a report is you are just officially documenting observed behavior. So it's based on behavior and indicators that somebody may be engaged in pre-operational surveillance, logistical planning, and it could be associated with terrorism or crime, and then with the school safety that comes into play as well. We get suspicious activity reports from a lot of different resources, a lot of different assets. We get community source reporting from the public. We get it from DFPS, the Department of Family and Protective Services, school resource officers. We've received some from university police departments as well. So really anyone can report. So why are they important? Well, really, when we're talking about school safety and really anything, it's to try to prevent threats through early identification and then actual intervention. So we need the reporting to ID that threat and then being able to intervene. And whether that means an arrest, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it means intervention to put a threat assessment together and put a management plan in place for that. It also might initiate criminal investigations. A report may identify a threat that we did not know existed, but somebody observed something and took the step to make that report to us. It may also provide leads to ongoing investigations. We had a report come from a public citizen that referenced someone with possession of child pornography. Well, that report coming from a public citizen allowed us to get that information to the agency that had the ongoing case, and it allowed them to take the case further than what they were going to be able to do with what they currently had. And then we can track individuals that may pose a threat and again put in some intervention to hopefully mitigate that and maybe actually get them the help and assistance that they need. So this is a busy slide, so I'm going to break it down. What should you report, or when you're talking to people or you're implementing, what should you report in suspicious activity? It's basically everything you can. What was observed, what was overheard, what was smelled. It's all of that all together, giving us the context. Now, important to note down there in red is we do not collect on any reporting that is based on race, religion, ethnicity, political, social views, things like that. So in saying that, you can use those things as descriptors of individuals, but you cannot use it to create suspicion. So somebody's ethnicity cannot create suspicion. It has to be based on somebody's behavior or some other indicators. We do have a privacy policy. It's posted to our website, and y'all are welcome to view that. So the Suspicious Activity Reporting Network. We really wanted to be able to create a holistic look of suspicious activity reporting across the state of Texas. After the 9/11 Commission came out and the breakdown was information sharing, what we didn't want to happen was to have stovepipes of information that weren't making connections across to each other and allowing us to have a full picture of what suspicious activity reporting is telling us in Texas. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because we have 8 separate fusion centers in Texas. And that really could create that stovepipe of that information. But the system that we're on allows each of us to control our own sites, put our information in, work our information, vet those suspicious activity reports, analyze them, and use our resources that are in our regions. But it also allows us to make connections across these different organizations. So if Dallas PD puts in a report, and then we get a report from one of our troopers, and it's on the same person, the same car, the system pulls those up as potential matches and lets us know that this person's been reported on before. So it may allow us to actually escalate a threat or get full identification of that threat. There may be limited information in one report, but when you put it with the other one, it makes that connection for you. So just like I talked about, collection, the reporting is very easy. I'll fly through what those screens look like at the end, and they'll be available to you, but the reporting is very easy. But more important than that is the actual connecting the dots. It's putting the puzzle together. So let's talk about school safety. You know the background that kind of escalated it in Texas. First we had Parkland in Florida, but then a few months later we had Santa Fe right here in our home state. And after this happened, the governor hosted multiple roundtables, and they were a multidisciplinary approach to even include students sometimes, and parents and lawmakers and just law enforcement. So it was a good approach, and some things came out of that. He had a school and firearm action plan, and in that, it talked about preventing threats in advance. And so a lot of times in terrorism world, you hear left of boom. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that early warning, and that's by using the suspicious activity reporting program. And then after Texas Safety Action Report, and that actually followed the issuance of those 8 executive orders, order number 5 is where it said that DPS shall work with the Texas Education Agency and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So this is a report. It actually did not come in as a suspicious activity report, but I like to talk about this because it speaks to what can happen if a threat is identified early and law enforcement is made aware and takes appropriate action. So in this case, we had 2 Uvalde students that were actually planning an attack on their school. Now, they were actually planning it for the anniversary of Columbine, but it was when they were going to be seniors. Well, they escalated that threat, and they were going to actually do it in 2018. So another student heard this, reported it. Uvalde PD got involved the Rangers. They were able to follow up on this. How they were logistically going to get their weapons acquisition. They had planned on stealing weapons from their neighbor's home. They were actually making a list of students and ranking them, and I think they had planned on actually committing suicide. What we're seeing a lot in the reports that we're getting is this obvious obsession or with the Columbine shooters. And in this case, they were actually referring to themselves using the shooters' names, those Columbine shooters' names. So because law enforcement was able to get involved, they were able to be arrested before carrying out their plan. So that reporting, that early warning is very important. Here's a suspicious activity report that we got. Came from an anonymous source. Concerned about a 16-year-old's posting on Facebook, and he actually talked about hating schools, bullies, and his teachers. Again, you see the Columbine shooter connection. His profile picture was one of them. It was unknown at the time if the subject actually had access to weapons. Well, we did some research, and we located an additional social media account, and he actually talked about wanting to watch his teacher die. And it wasn't broad, I want to watch all my teachers die. It was very specific. There was one teacher that was identified. So we got this in, and we worked with our DPS assets in the region, and they were able to work with the local PD and the ISD police department. So the parents were contacted, and they were very cooperative because they had already had concerns. But this was the push that they needed to get him counseling. They voluntarily removed weapons from the home, and the local PD and ISD PD are monitoring the situation. They've put a plan in place to monitor this situation. Now, like I said, some of these may not end up in arrests. And hopefully, especially with someone young, maybe they don't need to be an arrest. Maybe it's that we're intervening in a way that's very positive for the student and put something into place to help them. Maybe it's that they need to be removed from a bad situation. Each is going to be different. And you saw in the Uvalde one that they were actually arrested. So each circumstance will be different. So when we're talking about school safety, and why we feel like iWatch Texas is really kind of the best to use, it's because it networks across the state, and it networks from different sources. So it looks at community source reporting. It looks at law enforcement source reporting. If a kid is in a private school and goes to a public school and those records don't follow him, it doesn't matter, him or her. Or if they leave high school and they go to a college or university and some of that information doesn't go to the college and university, it doesn't matter, because if another report comes in on that individual, it's still contained in the network to make that connection. So, but in this case, we had an 18-year-old high school sophomore. So you already see there's probably been some issues in this kid's life, right? He was encountered and it was following a pursuit. He had a rifle with 100 rounds of ammunition with him. He was very preoccupied. The trooper said he was just hyper-focused on making it to school that day, which is concerning considering what he had in the vehicle with him. He had some suicidal ideations and had actually attempted suicide. Advised the jail staff that he had been depressed. So in this case, again, we sent it to our DPS resources who worked with the locals, and contact were made. So this was an adopted child, many phobias per the parents. He'd been in public school but had just recently been moved to a private school. So you see there that moving from one school to the other, whereas if it's contained in a closed reporting system, those connections may not be able to be made. The subject has been put into counseling and schools were notified of this. So reporting methods, there are several ways to report that you can report from your university. We have a website, iwatchtx.org. It's a very simple process to fill out. We have a phone line that's available. It's monitored 24/7 by law enforcement analysts. There's an iWatch Texas app that's available for public use. It's available on iOS and Android devices. So this is going through very quickly because I know y'all have other things to look at. We did change it to where reports can be made anonymously now. That was following the school safety action plan. We made it to where students could feel comfortable reporting. They could report it anonymously. There is a mapping consideration, and that's because we can look geospatially across things and make connections and do some analysis that way. This is the narrative field. This is the most important part of any suspicious activity report because this is where you identify what behaviors, what indicators were observed, and give us that real good context of the report. You can provide the person's name and address if possible. So I will say on the person print and the vehicle print information, anything unique is important because you may have access to report a license plate number, but somebody in the public may not. They may just see a vehicle engaged in suspicious activity, and they will put in a descriptor, a unique paint job, a bumper sticker, something like that. So any bit of detail can be important for us making those matches and really being able to potentially put those puzzle pieces together and identify that potential threat. You can add attachments to it. It can be photos, it can be images, it can be Word documents, Excel, all of that. So this is what the school safety portion of the app looks like. Now, we had it set up to be a pretty long process to enter all of that information in, and the feedback we got from students was we are not going to do it. They didn't want to fill all that out. So we really kind of stripped down the very specific descriptor information and asked that they put it into the narrative. Now, that can be hit or miss, but we'd rather get some information than them not report something at all. On this one, on the school safety, there's actual activity codes that we built in. Those are very specific to other programs across the country that we looked at when we were building out our school safety portion. You'll see some of these are not crime-related, and in suspicious activity reporting, sometimes it's not crime-related. But what we want to do is if they have, again, suicide ideation, we want to try to intervene and get them assistance and get them counseling and get them what they need in order to move forward and be successful. A lot of the threats that we're seeing are coming from us through social media. They're getting reported that students are seeing this on social media, so we built that out as a potential reporting, hopefully actually getting a screenshot of the information. We have some resources on the website and on the app for how to use, how to download the app and everything. There's a trifold brochure that we really felt were important for parents and administrators, absolutely knowing students would not carry around a trifold brochure. But we also built a reference card, and we kind of built this in the shape of a student's cell phone, so they could drop it down in their cell phone if they wanted it. That way they'd have it available to them. We're actually going through the process of revamping this. It's still going to have the information on how they can report, but on the other side, we're actually going to put kind of a reactive, the avoid, deny, defend, active shooter response for them. So that's kind of going through that process now. Our path forward, we want to enhance our current partnerships and actually develop, this is a brand new partnership, so we're really looking forward to working more closely with the Higher Education Coordinating Board and really with the Texas Education Agency, building out public awareness campaigns. So we're really looking forward to developing that. We want to increase our school safety related reporting and then be able to really improve that information sharing between law enforcement and school-based administrators, whether it's at the higher education or in our high schools and junior highs. This is my contact information. That was very fast, I know. But do y'all have any questions? There's somebody in there. Yeah.
We're videotaping.
So a lot of us have our own apps already. Do you know if this can be embedded into an existing app for an existing college or university?
So the vendor that we have does have an API available. A lot of it's going to depend on resourcing. So we would like to be able to fund that build out with the schools and universities, but I don't think we're going to get there. So if the schools would like to fund that, we will definitely work with them through our vendor to do that. But it is something that we've talked about, trying to do kind of a poll to see if there's some consistently used apps or vendors across the board for school safety. And if there is, then maybe that's something that we could look into trying to get funding for to do it across the board for those more heavily used, consistently used apps.
So what exactly is the coordinating board supposed to do? What is its role in this effort?
So I'm still trying to figure everything out, but I think it's really to try to push the message of, for one, reporting in general. But for the other, like I flew through, we feel like iWatch Texas is really the best for reporting because of the nature of being able to make connections across multiple entities, across different geographic jurisdictions and different reporting entities. So from the public through law enforcement through the schools. And I think that's kind of the message that we're going to try to work with, understanding some of the difficulties for higher education. So like she brought up, everybody may have a different app. So how can we work through that process? Does that help? Not really.
So it's a work in progress.
It is. It's very much a work in progress.
Okay.
I have been so focused on the first 3 executive orders because they had that timestamp on them that they had to be done by. And so now moving forward to try, because really each one kind of feeds the next, that public awareness campaign, TEA, higher education board kind of feeds into then the threat assessment teams and how we respond to.
Okay, well, if when you get to the point that you know exactly what you want us to do, make sure you contact us. So we'll comply with the statute.
No, well, I honestly, I don't want to dictate to you. I want it to be a partnership because I want to make sure that we're meeting y'all's interest as well.
Yes, we want to
Okay.
be helpful, but to
Yeah.
also comply with the statute.
Okay.
So that's
All right. Okay. All right. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.